Vice Chair Heil. Secretary McHugh.
Here.
Trustee Rowell.
Here.
Trustee Singer. Chairman Whitehouse.
Here.
City Manager Reese. And City Manager Gleason.
Some will be joining here in a little bit. City Manager Gleason will be joining, so will Linda. We have a board member that's virtual because of one of the accepted reasons for missing a meeting. So I need a motion and a second to approve Vice Chair Heil to participate. Moved by Trustee Buchanan, second by Trustee McHugh. Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Buchanan.
Yes.
Trustee Foster is not here. Vice Chair Heil cannot vote. Secretary McHugh.
Yes.
Trustee Rowell.
Yes.
And Chairman Whitehouse.
Yes. Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's that. The mission of Connect Transit is to provide safe, reliable transportation and access to opportunities to strengthen and enrich individual lives, our community, the economy, and the environment. Public comments.
There are none.
We'll just item E, the consent agenda. Need a motion and a second for approval. Moved by Trustee McHugh, seconded by Trustee Rao. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the financial reports, you'll see one slight anomaly. It's not very, doesn't stick out too much, but in the income statement, you'll see that our professional services are well over budget this year. That's because a few of the professional services are paid for in lump sums, and some of those lump sums have been paid. So as the year progresses, that number will go down.
What remind me, professional services include?
In this case, it was, I believe, the software service that we paid for in advance. In the performance report, the January performance report, we did have a couple of very cold days in January, and ISU was closed. So our ridership in January wasn't as high as it has been, but you can see system-wide it's up about 10.34%. Something that we continue to look at is the Connect Mobility ridership, which was up 22% for the year. As you recall, we budgeted about 12%. I'll have a few slides on that later in the presentation. Another thing to pay attention to is the operator pay hours to service hours. You can see that this year to date is 1.29. What that is how many hours we actually pay for report and things like that versus the actual hours on the street. So we've been managing that very well. We budgeted 1.3 and right now we're at 1.29. That's favorable for us, so that's a good thing. Looking at the Cardinal report, the one thing that this doesn't have is something that we submitted today, as a matter of fact. We submitted a RAISE grant. A RAISE grant is a high dollar grant that's typically reserved for transportation projects. We submitted it for our solar project, our proposed solar project, in the event that if for any reason we lost power, we would still be able to run our electric buses. So we tied it to transportation and really tied it to the fact that without that transportation, a lot of people can't get to school, can't get to work, can't serve their own needs. So we're hoping that it'll be responded to favorably. We've asked for about $8 million on that grant as a RAISE grant. The minimum for a RAISE grant, I believe, was $2 million. So we're well within the range for that particular grant. And then Cornerstone, you'll see that the legislature is actively working right now. There are a lot of things that we're monitoring on behalf of the Illinois Public Transit Association and Connect Transit. We're working very closely with Cornerstone to either submit support for certain bills or lack of support for other bills. So we're actively working on that. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them afterwards. And that's my report.
Questions for David? Okay, seeing none, there's a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Buchanan.
Yes.
Vice Chair Heil.
Yes.
Secretary McHugh,
Yes.
Trustee Rao,
Yes.
and Chairman Whitehouse.
Yes. Motion is consent agenda is approved. Takes us to item F. Under our new structure, we have committee reports. So we're going to call these. There is, let's start with marketing report. David, how do you want to do these?
I think that you could both call on either
Okay.
Trustee Buchanan or
Tim and I have met with our reading staff, so
So
Tim's gonna get started.
a couple of updates as far as what the messaging committee and marketing committee is doing. We had a discussion.
Messaging committee, sorry.
We think that the concept 3 from A to beyond is the one that we want to focus on rolling out. First, we think it has the most potential for sort of long-term benefit. It really ties to this idea of being able to tell our story to the community. So we think it has the most potential, and we think that the other concepts underneath it, there's space for those to kind of roll into concept 3 over the course of time. One of the things that we do think is important, we started talking about, is some sort of measurement metric, and we don't have details on that yet, but we want to work with Dovetail to kind of say, as we roll this out, how are we going to see what our return on investment looks like? How are we going to be able to measure, did the campaign accomplish what we wanted it to? So that is one of our goals a little bit further down the line. And I'll let Judy talk about some of the actions that we've taken so far.
Our committee, Tim and I and the staff, approved a committee charge, basically our purpose. And that is to get the Bloomington community to see the value that Connect provides where they live, work, and play by implementing a messaging campaign that showcases Connect's benefits to all and builds upon itself over time. We thought that was consistent with where we've come from, the conversation we had with the Connect to the Future group and continue to have in terms of trying to really increase the awareness in our community of the benefit and the value of Connect Transit. So that is our charge, and that's going to sort of be the long-term messaging. As Tim said, we'll be rolling the other two concepts into this. We're looking at, as part of that charge, Dovetail shared with us a number of deliverables that they could provide, and it was a fairly lengthy list. With Aubrey's help, we identified many of them that are already in process here or that are being done, and in some cases are being revised, so that we've got that under control. For us, we are going to suggest to Dovetail that the priorities in order of importance are vehicle racks, social media templates, bus shelters, and roll units. That's videos that can be used. We kind of use that with Flex as an example, as a way to kind of begin to get the word out there. So we're excited about where we are, and I told Tim that I pulled out, and I know this is older, but one of the things that Connect to the Future really, one of the recommendations was a community campaign. And the language, it's interesting, is consistent with where we are today. The language was to engage and educate all riders and Connect partners, for us that's the community, in the value of our public transit system. So I think we are consistently doing what the public and others have suggested that we do. So we're now going to get into deliverables and some more assignments for Dovetail and for the staff here. And as Tim said, we're very cognizant of, as we go, the greatest of program, if we have no way to measure whether it is a success or how effective it is, we have to have that, as well as we're cognizant of the budget. This is being paid for by a grant, and we have utilized a lot of that grant for the research and the surveys and the study that Dovetail did. So we're aware of, just as we go forward, we're going to keep our feet and theirs to the fire so that we aren't proposing things that will end up costing us above and beyond that grant, because then we have a budgetary problem. So I don't know if there's questions or for us this evening, March, we hope to have some specific recommendations. But tonight we were hoping that we could get consensus on the direction we're going. If seems reasonable, if this seems like where we want to go. You all saw the presentation from Dovetail. You've heard us talk about this for several years. So if this is the direction that seems acceptable, then we want to pursue it. If not, we need to hear some some conversation on it.
Questions? What's the A to beyond again? Remind me which one that is.
It was concept number 3.
Yeah, that doesn't
It
remind me.
was, yeah, it was, the vehicle design had like some key spots on it showcasing 2 people saying to my master's degree, to my next workplace, to my career. So kind of, yeah, Judy has a photo of
And
it.
I picked up on this right away. The bus wrap, it kind of has a blue, almost like a route, green route. And the backdrop could be any of the sites in the community where we live, work, and play that we take people to for play, for work, for doctor's appointment, whatever, as a way to emphasize where we're going and the value that we do contribute and benefit by getting places people to. So we thought that had some real value.
I'm comfortable with it. I would ask, when we do have those deliverables, when we're talking about it, maybe if we can put them on a slide or something like that so the board can see them,
Oh, yeah.
so we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Other questions on this program? Good one. Clearly Tim and Judy. Julie, anything, thoughts?
Yeah, quickly, thank you, Judy and Tim, for your work there. I think this is a very nice reflection of the way we are engaging in these committees as a board. And I'm so happy to hear the continuity between Connect to the Future and this work. It's been a long time coming, but it seems very positive, and I've got a lot of confidence in you all. So keep us posted and let us know how we can support.
Hi, Pam. Okay, sounds like you have your consensus, you have your charge, you know what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. We want to look that way.
Yeah. Is there anything for ops and planning tonight?
Ops and planning didn't meet, we will meet next month though.
Okay. Finance, I know they met about budget. I'm gonna hold that until we come right before your budget and then have Julie give an update on that, if that's okay.
That's
So that
fine.
way, we don't
That
jump
works fine.
back and forth. Takes us to new business, item A, recommendation for insurance brokerage services. I need a motion and a second for approval, moved by trustee Rao, seconded by trustee Buchanan. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Every 5 years or so, we go out for brokerage services as required. This year we went out and Brady has the recommendation. Brady is a voice from above, so Brady, take it away.
Thanks, David. This recommendation is to authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Marsh McLennan Agency for employee benefits and property casualty insurance brokerage services for a term of 5 years with a not to exceed annual value of $78,300. So historically, Connect Transit has used the services of a brokerage firm to solicit and contract for all of our insurance needs. And the reason we do that is because these brokerage firms has the expertise needed to negotiate preferred insurance rates with various carriers, assist employees throughout the open enrollment process, offer many value-added services to help manage costs, and provides risk assessment services to hopefully prevent claims. As David mentioned, we issued a request for proposals, seeking proposals for both services, employee benefits and property casualty. The RFP allowed for either a single contract for both services or allowed them to be split into separate contracts. In total, we received 6 proposals, one of which was deemed as unresponsive. And each service was evaluated individually to allow for that independent ranking of services in case the contracts needed to be split. Each proposal was ranked on the qualifications of the firm, the approach to addressing the needs identified in our scope of work, interviews conducted with primary account representatives, and the value-added services offered. In the end, Marsh McLennan Agency was identified as the top proposal for both services, and they are currently our incumbent contract holder for property and casualty services. And they have over 170 offices throughout the US and Canada with over 10,000 team members. This contract is, I should note that it is contingent upon IDOT pre-award approval, which is part of the process that we have to go through utilizing any of our downstate operating funds. And it is accounted for in our annual budget. And again, it's a not to exceed total of $78,300 annually. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mayor.
Questions, and I'm going to start with this because Brady, I'm going to put you on the spot here, just because I received emails here. So I'm going to ask you some questions. I want you to answer this, okay? So
Sure.
appreciate the public reaching out and asking questions. Can you talk about the process on how you select this? What things are acceptable to look at when you're reviewing these contracts and things you're not, that don't have any play or aren't allowed to be, that get extra points to in the evaluation? Just because I think I know this, but I just in case people are watching or see this, I think it's important for people to hear what we can do and what we can take into consideration, specifically local versus, non-local individuals.
Absolutely. I'm happy to answer that. And again, so just to reiterate, the things that we identified in our RFP that we were going to evaluate on this particular contract are the qualifications of each firm, their approach to how they're going to address the needs that we identified. So their technical approach, and the interviews conducted with the key account representatives, and then value-added services as well as cost. One thing that is not a factor, in fact, we are expressly prohibited from considering geographic preference of this type of contract. FTA, as mentioned, they prohibit that practice, and if we were to do that, this contract would not be allowable for federal or state funding. So those are the things that we did consider, and some of the one thing we certainly cannot. Did that answer your question?
Yep. Other questions? Trustee Buchanan.
And thank you, Brady. Can I assume that the proposal evaluation steps that you just enumerated for us, are they prescribed by federal or state authorities? Is that where they come from, or you mentioned?
No, actually,
No
I'm sorry,
geographic preference, but do they prescribe other things that we should be giving attention to?
so best practices provide some guidance on many of the things that you should consider, and those are the things that we typically do include. There are no specific requirements for the things that you include, although there are some specific things that are precluded from being considered. But we typically follow best practice using FTA guidance, and many of the things that I listed here are the things we very frequently use when we do an RFP to evaluate the responses.
And I think, yeah, thank you, because I think we've been very attentive and very good at doing that. Is the annual contract of 73, how does that compare with previous contracts we may have had in terms of overall cost?
Yeah, so it's pretty close in line. So currently, the reason we use a not to exceed value on this is because that many times these contracts can be satisfied with a commission rate. In fact, this one may possibly be included, be covered that way. So there may be a $0 value, but the reason we included it is because the not to exceed total is because we asked for a flat fee. So if this contract is covered at a flat fee, that'll be the total. And it is very close, as always. Costs have increased over the past few years, but it is in line with our independent cost estimate that we provided before this project.
Thank you.
Other questions? Motion and second on the floor for approval. Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Buchanan,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hyle,
Yes.
Secretary McHugh,
Yes.
Trustee Rao,
Yes.
and Chairman Whitehouse.
Yes, motion's approved. Take us to item B, recommendation for enterprise resource planning Joint consultancy, motion and a second for approval, moved by trustee Rao, seconded by trustee Buchanan. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I indicated many years ago when I first started here that we're using a system that I actually used over 20 years ago when I was in Peoria as a manager. And the system hasn't changed very much. So it does a lot of different things. It just doesn't do anything particularly well. Springfield, Peoria, Rock Island, Rockford, Champaign all use the same system. And this is a joint consultancy with multiple other transit systems to determine the best system for us to use and how we can benefit from that. So I'm going to let Brady discuss what that entails.
Thanks, David. Again, this recommendation is to authorize the general manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District, Rockford Mass Transit District, and MetroLink in the Quad Cities to enter into a joint consultancy effort to assist in facilitating the procurement of an enterprise resource planning software to replace the existing system in place. So as David mentioned, the software we currently use for all of our operations, or a majority of our operations, we've had for many years, and over the years it's been becoming increasingly unstable, even upon recently moving into the cloud-hosted version, which was supposed to improve compatibility, stability, and provide frequent updates and modernization. We haven't seen those improvements over the recent months, and neither have the peer agencies mentioned. Those other agencies throughout Illinois, they use the same system, and they often have experienced very similar challenges, which has created concerns over the long-term viability of the product. This led to the group mentioned to begin discussions regarding our plans and needs for ERP software replacements. And Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District took the lead in defining the needs of each agency and worked to contract with a consultant to help facilitate the replacement of software. They executed a contract with the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA for short, and they intend to proceed through this process either jointly or alone. There are many benefits to working with the peer agencies versus proceeding alone through this process. First, by working jointly, the cost of the project will be substantially less for all of us. We also anticipate learning valuable process improvements by participating through the evaluation of financial, maintenance, and human resource processes and systems with the peer agencies. We also believe that we will provide future support cost savings and efficiencies by being able to share those problems and solutions with those colleagues. We anticipate this project to last over the next 18 to 24 months. This timeline includes all the tasks identified in the recommendation that I won't read to you here. The financial impact of this recommendation is a little bit complex, just simply because of the nature of the agreement. The Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board of Trustees approved a contract with the GFOA for a not to exceed total of $350,000 for the entirety of the joint contract. The IGA that we are entering into will allow each agency to participate in only the stages of the project that is needed for each agency. So the cost will not be split evenly. As an example, some agencies don't need human resources software where we do, so our costs will be higher in those areas. In addition, the implementation phase of the project is still undefined because we don't know the software that we will eventually end up with. So those costs are yet undefined. We are seeking approval for a not to exceed total of $150,000 to apply to this joint consultancy effort. And this project is an allowable operating expense through the Illinois Department of Operating Systems program and will be accounted for in upcoming operating budgets. Of note, this joint consultancy IGA does not include the software itself. We are anticipating bringing contract recommendations for various software products to the Board of Trustees within the next 12 to 18 months. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Trustee Buchanan.
Thank you, Brady. I imagine everybody is jumping for joy that you're finally going to move on this one. And you began to identify what the 150 would buy. One, you said, identifying software needed by Connect Transit. What particular functions or facets do we need the software for that we considered in this agreement?
Yeah, great question. So this will replace virtually all of our software used to operate the business outside of some of the scheduling software that the operations team uses. So this will be human resources, this will be maintenance, this will be finance. We'll include grants management software. All of the core functionality of the business will be replaced by whatever system. One of the key benefits to working with GFOA through this process is there are very few pieces of software that are one suite package. And so there'll likely be multiple pieces of software, and they will make sure that everything operates cohesively, that they all communicate properly. And that's where the implementation phase will come in. They'll be sure that all the software works correctly together.
For a diet, I guess, huh? Other questions? So, other questions? Julie?
Yeah, I got my eye on this $150,000 request, which, I imagine you've done the math, but I'm just curious for the details on that, if you don't mind. That looks like about 42% of that $350,000 total. Can you explain, given that we've got other partners?
Yep, certainly. So as mentioned, some partners don't need certain pieces of software. They've already gone through, for example, Champaign-Urbana has already gone through the process of replacing their human resources software. That's going to be a fairly costly component of this, and just the analysis and scope writing that GFOA is going to have to go through to capture all of our needs for the HR software. So they will back out of that phase of the project where we will be in that phase. So that's a big component of it. And the reason we're asking for a not to exceed is we don't know exactly what that cost share is going to be for some of those, as well as we're also seeking some funding to help with the implementation of this, so that we don't have to come back later to ask for additional funding to implement this recommendation.
Thank you, Brady. And I'm with Judy. I imagine you guys are jumping up and down at this prospect, and I love the cross-agency, cost-sharing and collaboration. We get to learn from what they're up to, as well as share some dollars, so thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so I have some questions. So, Julie, you asked a question I was gonna go with a little bit there. But Brady, what you just said at the end there raises my ears a little bit when you're saying you're asking for money now for later implementation. We're gonna get a budget address here a little bit, and those numbers are gonna be a little high here. So I guess I'm asking you to forecast here. And then how are we gonna determine, what are we talking about? This is the study, and I guess maybe this isn't the time to answer it, maybe you can answer the budget later, and you can make that call, David, here, but what's the forecast of these programs, this software to implement, with the cost projections that we're gonna possibly see? Is this something that's gonna be a 1-year implementation, a multi-year implementation? Or have you looked at that kind of stuff and thought about this? And then my third question is, depending on cost on this, David, does this need to go to a finance committee if it's extreme costs, so the board can have some talk about what you with staff to say, hey, look, this is where we need to maybe put these into segments or something that way?
So
Does that make sense
yes,
to
you're
you?
absolutely right. So as Brady said, this does not include the software. So software will be a future request once we identify what the software is and how it all works together. So that will be a finance committee discussion, likely an operations committee discussion as well, because it does impact our operations, and we want everyone to understand how it impacts our operations.
Sure.
So for instance, the maintenance program that we have right now has all of our vehicle files going back years, from what I understand. So, anything that gets done in there, the work orders, all of that gets stored in that system, and that'll either have to be transferred or housed, and then we can use a different system. So there's a lot of different integrations that we need to do, and I think that those are things that we'll discuss at the committee level.
Okay, so, so I'm understanding you don't really have it, and this isn't a bad thing, you don't really know what you're gonna implement and when you're gonna implement and how much that's gonna cost. It might be a few years, it might be 1 year, depending on what.
That's what the
final number.
consultant study is gonna tell
Okay,
us.
so we won't know until that consultant study.
Correct.
So then that consultant, so that'll be the next 12, 18 months.
Correct.
So we're probably looking at least next year's budget before we can consider about looking at some of this stuff.
Correct, yeah. And as I recall, we do have some grant funds obligated for this, or not obligated, but set aside. Brady?
We did identify this project in our transportation improvement
Right.
program, and so they are allowable for federal 5307 funds, as mentioned, Illinois Department of Operating the DOE program.
So the last question, I want to come back to what Brady said there, is when you said you're asking for more, so we don't have to come back to ask for money. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so as mentioned, we don't know exactly what the software will be recommended. And so the implementation phase of this project is yet undefined. Although I will mention that's a small piece of this project. The consulting piece and the procurement assistance is the majority of this project. The implementation is the latter years.
Okay, so I'm not understanding this clearly.
Yeah.
So if that's the implementation process, then why are you asking for money now for the implementation process when we don't know what the implementation process is gonna be?
So the implementation is included in this contract with GFOA. They are going to be assisting with the implementation. We just don't have we know what the process looks like. We just don't know the exact dollar amount because we don't know yet what the recommendation will be for interoperability and how the software will function together.
Okay, so,
So rather than a separate contract, we want to lump it all into this one contract because that's the way it's written currently.
so that 150 will, so the study might not cost 150. You're saying the 150, the study, but the implementation might be more. Well, will be
The
more.
implementation is a portion of the whole contract.
So when you
which
say,
part of it is part of it is a study, part of it is implementation.
okay,
But it's one contract.
okay, but when you say implementation, what are you implementing? Like the software programs and all that stuff?
Correct. So what they recommend,
Yeah.
we'll have to go out and purchase those softwares, which will be a different discussion altogether. That's not part of this discussion right now.
And so this company can implement those softwares that say we buy from company A or B over here?
Correct, yeah. Yeah,
They
so
will
it'll
oversee
be,
the implementation. They will make sure that the people that we contract with are living up to their obligations via the contract and everything like that. So they oversee the implementation. They don't actually do the implementation, but they oversee.
Kind of like a general contractor type thing, okay.
Yes.
Does that make sense? What do you
Here
say?
I'm seeing the three things. First thing is identifying our needs. Am I correct? Identifying the needs, or rather, do we have any existing software already?
we do, yeah, we have
So-
an aging software.
So the next thing is identifying the requirements means that we are doing any study of with respect to any other software, particular software, or just identifying the requirements.
They will identify the requirements, they'll identify what softwares are in the market right now that best meet our needs and meet the needs of the consortium of purchasers. So again, there's 4 transit systems that will be involved and that's part of the reason why it's $350,000. So again, there's 4 transit systems that will be involved and that's part of the reason why it's $350,000 is they're identifying all of our needs separately. And as Brady said, some have different needs than others. So
Yeah, we are coming up with the price without knowing anything. That's what my concern.
oh, I see.
First thing is we should have some software against which we can study our requirements, whether it is matching that software or not, and then purchase that software. Second investment is we have to purchase the software. Third thing is the implementation of the software.
Right.
These are the three things. 2 things we don't know yet.
Correct.
What software we are going to do, purchase, and what software we are going to implement.
Right. So the consulting study will help us identify
Yeah,
what
only
software.
consulting study, we are going to do that.
Brady, it's 12 to 18.
12 to 18 months.
Or 18 to 24 months. Is that right,
It
Brady?
says 12 to 18
Oh,
months.
12 to 18 in the report.
Yeah.
12 to
Yes,
18 months for study.
So the,
for 4 systems?
or the actual consulting portion of this project is 12 to 18 months, and then, total project, including implementation, would be likely 18 to 24.
Yeah, that's the timeline.
Yeah, study is too long, that's what I
Oh,
have seen
okay.
here.
Hey, Brady, what,
Big systems we do within a short time.
and so Trustee Rouse says that timeline seems a little extended.
Yeah.
What do they say about that? Does seem a long time to do a study. They're the government?
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, if you break all the steps that are required, it's actually a very complex process to really, I mean, it goes much further than just evaluating and writing specs on a piece of software. We're gonna take a look at the processes that agencies are using. They're gonna look at all of the different they're gonna gather all the information, all the requirements for the software and, as mentioned, each business process. So they do have what we feel like is a fairly aggressive timeline. In fact, they've already worked on scheduling meetings to facilitate this process. And I believe that it would take, if we tried to do this alone, it would take us far, far longer to accomplish these goals because we just don't have the expertise to do so.
What do you say?
I don't know why it takes so. We do big systems within short time. Maybe because of the government. Such maybe there.
And we can share with you what the proposal is, so you can take a look at the process.
Sure.
Other questions, comments? Trustee Buchanan?
Comment or observation, the hardware that we have we anticipate it will be able to accommodate all this new software.
Well, the beauty is it's all in the cloud right nowadays, isn't it,
It's
Steve?
just basically connectivity,
Okay.
as long as you can connect to it.
And it kind of, and I'm listening, as I listen to, I think the age of all the systems that we're wanting to upgrade, probably it's probably costing us more now because of the age of that. Would you agree with that observation?
I don't know. I think that it's been updated over time. It was recently purchased by another company, and that company is now recognizing that the way it was built initially was not the right way. So that's why a lot of the delays are occurring and things like that.
Because we've had conversations over the years about different problems.
Right.
I think software, you tell me if I'm wrong, right? Doesn't matter if our system's 20 years old or 5 years old. If you implement new, it's gonna, they're getting you,
If it
right?
is new, it's very easy to identify the software that we have to
Well,
purchase.
Oh, the chair doesn't work. That chair doesn't work.
Here's one.
Here, take this one.
For instance, Trustee Rao, you might appreciate this, is that the system that we're using is still Access-based, Microsoft Access.
Yeah.
So it's very slow.
No, I agree. We have to implement the new software, definitely. See, what we do is, I mean, in case, instead of starting from the requirement, already some other transport or transits might be implementing this software.
Right.
Or rather, they might have already implemented. I mean, we can evaluate with respect to that software and identify the gap analysis and implement it.
I'll share the proposal with you so you can see all the steps that they're gonna go through.
Yeah.
And I guess just,
Trustee Buchanan.
if we weren't joining with these other agencies, considering we have a fairly significant need, it sounds like, compared to some of the others. If we were to embark upon going alone, we possibly could do it in a shorter period of time, and I suspect at a much greater cost.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yep. My caution is just when we want to update, but budget, always keep the budget in our minds here. Budget is in our minds. Other questions or comments? There's a motion and a second for approval. Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Buchanan?
Yes.
Trustee Foster?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hyle?
You're gonna love it, Linda.
Yes.
Secretary McHugh?
No,
Trustee Rao?
Yes.
And Chairman Whitehouse?
Yes. Takes us to item C, system performance update, informational. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me switch the slide. So I wanted to give you just an overview of where we are right now with our system in terms of ridership, in terms of comparisons to the last 2 years. I didn't go all the way back to 2019. I think that we need to start building upon what we know rather than things. Transportation has changed significantly since 2019. People are traveling differently. So I think that we need to take that into account as we look at these numbers. So you can see our fixed route continues to grow, but slightly. Our service is following the same trends as previous years. And again, in January, this little dip is primarily based on some of the cold weather that we had and when ISU was closed. Next one. So this is our service by route, and you can see our Redbird Express is by far the most popular route, followed by the red, the line, the one that goes right in front of here, but connects uptown to downtown. Green, also a connector between uptown and downtown. Yellow that goes out to Heartland, and so on. We are very cognizant of the performance of anything below the aqua, so the sapphire, the blue, the tan, and so on. Looking at ways to improve that performance. One of those services is really operating at a ridership per hour basis that equals Connect Flex. So we'll be looking in the future as to how we might be able to modify routes to enhance others and serve the area better with more efficient service. Connect Mobility, we've had this discussion almost every month, but our ridership continues to go up. You can see where we were in 22, that's that dark blue line. 23 was the orange line, and we continue to increase year over year. So our ridership continues to be up. Again, this month year to date was 22%.
Can I go back to that?
Yeah.
Have you looked at that? Like, I know it sounds crazy, but is our population getting older in this community since you go there?
There'll be a slide, yeah.
Okay.
The one thing that I think Shelley and her team have done a great job on is continuing to increase the trips per hour. And this means a lot because the more people we can get on a bus means the fewer hours that it takes to carry that many people. The problem is the number of buses that we have is somewhat fixed. We don't have any new buses in the pipeline, yet our ridership continues to increase. So, almost by default, I think some of this is going to be affected. Our trips per hour will likely be high. Our on-time performance will likely drop, and some other quality issues are going to be affected. We do have 6 buses on order with the state, and then an additional 2 as a pilot program for electric buses through the state, but we don't anticipate getting those for the next 12 months. So we're definitely watching this and watching for ways that maybe we can transfer folks either to different vehicles or even we've even looked at the used vehicle market.
I know I'm asking a lot of questions, but
That's
I
fine.
want to know
No,
this.
it's good.
So when you say Shelley and her team are working to get more per hour, what does that mean?
So
What does that look like?
there's something called slack time. That slack time is really the time between pickups. They're trying to keep people located in particular areas so that the time between pickups is a little less, that they're sitting. Every now and then you see a Connect Mobility van in a parking lot.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that they're killing time. That means that they just don't have somebody at that particular time. And we ask them to stop so they're not burning fuel and they're not wearing out the motors. They're trying to compress those times and get those people together more often. So during COVID, you can see in 22, we were really trying to limit the number of people on the buses so that they weren't spreading. Now we're trying to maximize those people on the buses.
So you do that because we had a talk a few weeks ago about something like this.
Right.
So you do that because there's a limit. If someone says I want to pick up at 3:00, you have a window on each side, right?
Yes.
So you kind of say, okay, we're going to pick you up maybe 15 minutes later than what you requested.
Correct.
Fits within that window, but it fits with that slack time.
Yeah. So that's how we reduce the slack, actually. It's a very good point. So we're able under the ADA to negotiate an hour before, an hour after the trip. So that's what we try to do too. We try to maximize that negotiation so that we can maximize the people on the vehicle. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to tell somebody that, their doctor's appointment is at 9, so we need to pick you up at 7. it's very challenging.
Oh, yeah.
It is, but, and you see 22% increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next slide. So I just wanted to kind of show a system comparison between us and the other systems. And this really isn't to talk about how their performance is better or worse than ours, but it's more about the number of vehicles. So this is the data that I can pull, the most recent data from fiscal year 22, the National Transit Database report. And you can see right now we're anticipating about 120,000 rides this year. Peoria CityLink had 117 in 2022 with 46 buses. We will have 120 with 19 buses. So it's just very challenging, and I just want you to know that I'm not proud of this at all, but we will likely face some service challenges. Right now, we still run over 95% on-time performance, and that's a real testament to the drivers who are rushing to get people in and get people out. As our ridership continues to grow, our performance is going to be affected a little bit. And I just want you to know that ahead of time in case complaints come in. We will do our best to supplement that number of vehicles and increase it as we can.
So when is like a best practice, like what percent, like when you hit 93% on-time performance, you start, I mean, that's kind of
Right.
limit, but 90%, 85% on-time, you start talking about, hey, we need to get more drivers, more buses. I know that's a problem right now, but
Yeah.
when's like a best practice for a system? What's an acceptable number there?
That's really established by the board. So as you know, in my past life, I bid on systems trying to run them as a for-profit service. And a lot of boards had service standards, 95 being the most acceptable. Typically, if you fell below 90%, there will be liquidated damages assessed. So that means that between 90 and 95% on-time performance was acceptable to a board. Anything below that, they wanted the contractor to do something to get it higher. And that's what we were charged with doing. Some of that is vehicles, some of it is drivers. Some of it is scheduling. It's just a lot of nuance. I remember in Peoria, we ran to certain group homes and things like that, where you're picking up a busload of people at a time. And that really impacts your productivity number. So at times we were at five passengers an hour, but we don't have that here in Bloomington. So every system is different. Every community where people go is different. As you recall, we did lower the fare and increased our service parameters. So we are serving a lot more area than we were with the same
Lower
number
it
of
substantially.
Okay. So this is what you were asking about. On the left-hand side, you'll see the Bloomington population in 2020, and the top range is those 80 to 84 down to about 2/3 down, 60 to 64. And you can see kind of the number of people in that range, male and female. As we get into 2050, as that population, or as time goes on, the population changes, those numbers get significantly higher. So looking at the long-term forecast of 2050, those people will continually increase. If you just look at the past, so from 2000 from 2010 to 2015, it increased 10.25%. From 2015 to 2020, 18.95%. So that senior population is growing. I'm not saying that every senior requires mobility as much as it is more likely that they would use mobility in their senior years. So it's an interesting situation. We're kind of a victim of our success to some degree, and I think that we're serving the people that the community expects us to serve. So this is all great information. It's just challenging because it's an expensive service to provide. Next. I wanted to also demonstrate our Connect Flex. So you can see towards the last right-hand side of that, that was when we started charging a fare. So we had significantly higher numbers in the fall. They dropped a little bit when we started charging fares. We started charging January 2nd when we started service again. But those numbers are starting to creep up again. So the green is actually the number of trips that were actually provided. So those that, those, people were actually on board the bus. The orange are unaccepted proposals, so that means that they tried to book a ride, and they decided not to do it after all. The cancellations and no-shows are the things that we're really managing now. So when somebody has a cancellation or a no-show, that means that we've sent the vehicle to get them, and a lot of times they're late cancels, so they cancel before we get there, or they just don't show up. And that means that that vehicle is out of commission for the next person. So that's something that we've been really managing. We meet every Monday to talk about just the performance of the system, how many no-shows, how many seat unavailables, because with high cancellations tends to be also high seat unavailables. So we're trying to get people to recognize that their actions impact others. So we've sent a messaging campaign through the app to let them know that cancellations aren't good, and we're starting to send them letters, especially if they're regular abusers of cancellations.
Do we have a cancel policy?
We do, yeah. Our cancel policy is very similar to Connect Mobility right now. So do you recall exactly what it is, Aubrey?
I believe it's 3 within a month.
Oh, okay.
It's 3 within a month.
And then
Okay.
it's a suspension for 3 days?
Okay.
3 days, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see it actually. You left. Yeah, so there is an opportunity to suspend service for a period of time if they continue to abuse the system. But you can see our utilization is high, 4.5 riders an hour. Like I just said, our utilization on mobility is just about 2.6. So the utilization of this from a productivity perspective is much higher. On fixed route, however, utilization is 17, so that's still by far the most efficient service that we run. These are really the active riders, those who took a ride in the last period, versus the new riders. So the dark blue is the people who are active and are continued users. The light blue are the new riders that have ridden for the first time. So we continue even now to have new riders. These are the number of accounts that have been established. You can see, when school came into session, highest number of accounts, and that continues to stay stable. And then the experience rating. A few things. The average rating is 4.9, so that means that people out of 5, so people do enjoy riding the service. The 47.4 is an aggregation rate. And what that really means is that of all the trips, 47.4% of the time they're riding with others. So that means that there's more than one people on the bus, and that's what we want. We want this to be a group trip situation. So we're doing a very good job with that. It's not a taxi cab. Let's just say that. Going back, I'm sorry. So the average ride duration is about 8.5 minutes, and the average weight pickup time is 10 minutes. So those are all still
That's
very,
acceptable.
yeah, still very good
Better than fixed routes.
parameters.
Impressive, yeah.
Now, again, that's average, so some are lower and some are much higher. So I think we do a good job staging our vehicles where the next ride is going to be, and we continue to look at that.
So remind me, so you told me, this report told me that utilization is higher than Connect.
Mobility, correct.
And Connect Flex is more affordable than Connect Mobility, correct?
Connect Flex is $1 right now, correct.
No, for us to operate.
Oh, that's from a cost per passenger perspective, yeah. It's more affordable for a couple of reasons. So we do have a lower driver rate for Connect Flex, but from a cost per passenger, it's about $15 versus $25 based on the last report.
Questions? Are you ready for questions?
Yeah, that's it.
Questions? Trustee McHugh.
When we launched Flex, or when we sort of first laid it out, what was our sort of target utilization number? And we said it was the 4.5. In our best case scenario, or when we laid this out, where do we think that number would be?
Our target based on the experiences of other systems was about 3.5 to 4.5.
Yeah.
So we're where we want to be.
Thank you.
Other questions? Looks popular. Anecdotal, I was on a group bike ride this afternoon and people are, I'm saying that Connect Flex everywhere in a good way. Yeah.
So it's flex taking away riders from fixed.
I think anecdotally, we can say that there are some people that take flex instead of the line, from certain areas. I think probably on the aqua, there's a little bit, so we are looking at that to see if we can kind of pull back. The challenge is, you know, if you do live in an area that doesn't have fixed route and you want to get to that area, it's more efficient to just take them there than to take them to a fixed route. So we are evaluating that as well. We have a planning team with Shelley and Dave, our safety manager, our operations analyst, and they look at all these little different nuances to try to get people to go. You know, one of the biggest origins is, what is the apartment over here? Traditions apartment building, which is right across from Wiley Drive. And they go from Traditions to Walmart.
Right.
And literally, we could have a bus just running back and forth every 15 minutes just for them. Because as soon as somebody books, they get picked up and then somebody else books. So the next van has to go and pick them up. And it's just, those are things that we're trying to maybe establish a different type of schedule for that service so that they are actually picked up on a schedule, just by a flex service. Those are all kind of things that we're trying to do to make those vans available and make us a little more reliable. Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts on this one.
Yeah, because we work with a data company to look at all this stuff, right?
Yes.
What's it called? Vivia?
Via.
I know something. Via. Are they seeing that in other systems that are kind of doing this microtransit too, or
We have a call with them tomorrow, so I can ask. We haven't asked that particular question.
in
We
case
thought
they
that it
have
was
like
just
a
kind of
solution to that or something like that?
Every time we ask questions like that, every system is so different. So even when we ask for like a baseline of what our utilization should be, it depends on your system. So
Right.
I think it's very specific to our situation, and just, they may have some best practices, but I don't know that they're gonna have like a set solution for us, but we can certainly ask.
Yeah.
So kind of like to piggyback on what Linda said, so you said that since Flex is kind of, you said the Lime and the Aqua, has it been like, have you seen the number, that utilization number drop dramatically?
No, I'll do a comparison for next month. I should have done that for this month, but the Lime continues to increase, as does the Aqua. So our ridership continues to increase on both of those lines. Silver, probably not as much. So Silver goes directly through the zone. The app
Silver
is,
starts where in Walmart?
I'm sorry, yeah, it goes from Walmart into downtown,
Downtown.
but goes almost bisects the zone. One of the reasons why we implemented Flex in the zone that we did is because people couldn't get onto 6 Points Road because there's no sidewalk. It floods very easily, and it's unsafe to stand on. So people are using Flex rather than trying to board the Silver in certain areas. The Silver continues to have ridership and continues to perform better than, on a trip per hour basis, better than Flex. But we do see a little bit of a shift from Silver to Flex. The software is supposed to direct people to the fixed route if it can. So if somebody can use a fixed route quicker than they could use Flex, it's supposed to take them to the fixed route. They're still kind of refining that a little bit. What we've also seen is that if someone is recommended to run the fixed route, they'll cancel that, or they won't take that trip and they'll wait until the fixed route passes and then they'll book it. So I mean, there are ways to game the system for sure. But we're monitoring all of that, and I think the level of data that VIA gives us really allows us to dig in and see what we can do and come up with creative solutions.
What was this one?
That's actually for a budget discussion, so
Okay.
I'll kind of talk about that.
Other questions? Okay, thanks. I find that interesting. Thank you.
Can you send your PowerPoint slides to the board?
Oh, certainly, and they are available online as well.
Oh, okay,
They're always on the website.
okay, good.
Have they been uploaded yet?
Okay, then don't, yeah.
That takes us to item D, draft fiscal year 25 budget. This is gonna be informational. I know I'm gonna turn it to you, but Vice Chair Heil, you guys met, the budget committee met, finance committee met this week, you said? Last week, and that consists of Barb and Julie. So Julie, do you wanna share,
Sure,
high
sure, I'm happy.
high visions, and then we can have David do it. And let me say this, tonight, just so everyone feels comfortable here, okay? Tonight, you don't have to impress with super hard questions, like tonight is just the informational meeting. So we're not deep diving into this. We're gonna do this budget, and then we're gonna have he's gonna have one-on-ones, and then next month's meeting we'll have that really in-depth conversation about the budget. So if there are no questions tonight, that's okay, because it's just the first time we're kind of hearing it.
What I would say is, once again, thank you to David for meeting with the budget committee. What we basically did was a close read of the presentation that Dave is about to provide, as well as looked under the hood a little bit at more detail of the budget. I would just point out that the presentation just made about Connect Flex features prominently in our look ahead. We have got some interesting opportunities and challenges ahead. And so I'm eager for us as a board to get well educated about it and make some decisions here. Thanks again, David.
Thank you. So these are the issues that I want to talk about tonight, just the process, what the cost drivers are. The hours and miles are really the drivers of the budget, as well as some other things. Some scenarios, and then proposed budget justification. So I will be proposing a scenario that would be a preferred scenario for us, just for your consideration. We have some staff additions in this budget as well. Some expectations, things that we can start looking at in the future, and then capital budget. So the managers and directors actually start developing our budget in October, and we go from about October to January. Each manager and director develops a budget for their department, and then Pat assembles it into kind of a master budget where all the departments are housed. We submit a draft to the finance committee where once we have vetted it internally, we'll talk to the finance committee, which we did last week, and show them, first whatever presentation we have. But in this particular case, we had 3 different scenarios that we wanted to talk through. The draft to you is tonight, and then I'll have some comments on one-on-one between now and next meeting. And then our final will come to the board March 26th. So once we finalize our budget, we'll need to send it to IDOT by April 1st. And that allows them to budget, to know what needs to come out of the mass transit fund. So the main cost drivers, and I've said this every year, is hours, because hours equal labor, and that's wages, benefits, training. Miles, which equals maintenance, parts, labor, fuel, and those types of things. So, there are a lot of peripheral things. There's professional service contracts and things like that. But the primary cost drivers, the things that are actually making up our budget, are these things. So those other things, while they're expenses, they're not significant as compared to these. These are 2 scenarios. One is a status quo, and that's operating exactly as we do right now. If we did that, fixed rate hours would be about 117,000. And that's because there are a couple of extra operating days. I mean, nothing significant that's changing. You can see the mobility hours, however, are increasing substantially. So we're going from a budgeted amount of 40,000 this year to a budgeted amount of 53,000 next year, almost 54. And then I'm also proposing to start a microtransit, a couple of different zones. And that's actually why I have the little map in front of you. So as I refer to zones, you can see what zones I'm talking about. But a couple of new zones, but later in the year, because it's difficult to get vehicles at this time. So we're looking at not even being able to start a new zone until we get vehicles. What I'm proposing, however, is a reduction in the fixed route hours. Basically what we're providing today. So today, as you recall, back in January, on January 12th, or 15th, we started reducing peak service on our routes. Last year, we ran almost all year without peak service because of labor. We were happy to return to peak service, only to find out that then we had bus issues and we had to reduce back to reducing peak service again. So, for consistency's sake, I think that's one of the reasons why we would like to keep reduced service, peak hour service, but also because of the increase in costs. The increase in hours then precipitate obviously an increase in our budget. The routes that would be affected by that are the aqua, the blue, the orange, the purple, and the silver. And those would run on a 60-minute frequency. The yellow would begin running at a 30-minute frequency. So,
Okay. Just so no one has to ask,
Yeah.
explain where those routes go.
Oh, okay. So the yellow is the one that serves Heartland. That would continue
Uptown.
uptown to Heartland on a 30-minute frequency. Aqua is effectively South Main Street, so from downtown to South Main Street. Blue goes up to College Hills, right?
From downtown to.
From downtown to
Target.
College, yeah.
College Hill.
Orange serves the area where State Farm is, State Farm Corporate South. Purple also runs along Hershey Road and ends up in by Meyer and then at College Hills, right? And then the silver is the one that again bisects the zone to the south, the microtransit zone. So kind of southwest normal, or Bloomington.
What'd you say the time difference would be?
So it goes from 30 minutes to an hour on the aqua, blue, orange, purple, and silver. And then the yellow would go to a 30-minute frequency.
On the proposed one.
Yes, on the proposed route. So again, that's what we're doing right now. And you can see just the difference in hours. And the next slide, I'll kind of talk a little bit about some of the drivers. So, why is our budget increasing? Well, because of the difficulty in getting drivers. We were starting drivers at 60% of the top rate. We weren't able to find drivers at that rate because it was about $19 an hour. So we changed that to 70% of the top rate this year. We had budgeted for 60%, we started at 70%. So we're still running at 70% of the top rate to remain competitive in this area, just to get drivers in. We increased some staffing to meet the challenges and demands that you'll see in a few minutes. In maintenance, we had to start at 80%, but because again, we were not competitive, we were starting at 70%, but we couldn't stay competitive. And I think Charlie and I have had the discussion, we're still not all that competitive in maintenance, but we do have a good place to work and hopefully people do want to work for us. But we also have increased parts expenses, increased fuel use because of the reduction in the use of our electric vehicles. And then increases in insurance, health and liability continue to go up at mostly double-digit rates, and we planned a double-digit rate this year again. One of the main reasons why things are changing, our Connect Mobility hours are expected to increase 27% from the 24 budget. And the way that we looked at that was we actually we looked at the changes that we had compared to last year. So the first 5 months, I think, is when we actually came up with this calculation. And it averaged around 17%. And then we actually multiplied through 20% for the remaining year. So the 27% is kind of a change in each of the month's differences. So it's not a flat 20% from last year. It's we look at the changes in each month. So that's how we kind of came up with the 27%. We're gonna have some challenges, I mentioned that. But you can see this year alone, we budgeted 111,000 trips. We anticipate 121 based on ridership to date. That changes the hours from 40,000 to 49,000. And right now we're experiencing a little better than 2.545%. Next year, we're budgeting 2.63, as I said, that we're packing more people in, Shelley and her group, into the limited vehicles that we have. But our rates are going up. So, this year we expect that mobility is going to cost about $435,000 more than we budgeted. To be safe, we're budgeting at a 20% growth instead of the 12.5% growth that we budgeted for this year. So I know that these are a lot of numbers, and again, I don't expect you to have questions. I'll walk through this when we have our one-on-ones again, so you understand. The maintenance cost per mile is going up as well, primarily because our fleet is aging. So we try to keep them on the road longer. They're carrying more people, which puts more wear and tear. And you can see that that's a cost. That cost, by the way, does not include labor. That is only the parts cost, parts and supplies, so like oil changes and things like that. So, we're not adding labor, but we are adding certainly significant costs. So that kind of shows where we are. Again, not a bad thing. I just want to kind of bring this up to you as a reality, is that when our ridership increases because we're doing good work, our budget increases as a result. Okay. So this is a status quo scenario. I'm not going to go through each of the numbers, only to show you that if we continue to run the schedule that we have printed and continue to grow service in mobility, we would have an 11% increase in our budget. Next one. The proposed is no peak. So if we don't operate with peak service, we're still looking at a 6.9% increase in our budget. I looked at the assumption, so this is kind of outside of this discussion. I looked at the assumption of 20% versus 17, since 17 was really the average increase. We bumped it up to 20 just in case it increased more. And that only changes the budget by about 0.3%. So it does not make a huge impact going from a 20% increase in mobility ridership to a 17% increase. But just to be aware that, if we do take a little more risk, I guess, we could knock this down just a little bit more. Some of the main drivers you can see, actually what I wanted to point out, and this is something that I have to really attribute to the staff, is some numbers increase, but some numbers decrease. And what we do when we go into this is we don't look at what we did last year and try to bump it up by a certain amount. We try to figure out what we need to operate this year. So they look at the expense trends, they look at projects that we initiated last year that we don't need to do this year. So you'll see a lot of those that actually have decreased, things like the uniform. We had a great uniform procurement where the numbers actually went down, the cost went down. And some other things. So, you can see the only reason why wages would go down is because we have new employees and some of the senior employees dropped off. So that's how some of those changes are made. But you can see some of the main things are definitely fuel. There's a little bit of an increase in that. Professional services, that's the GFOA budget as well as our lobbyists and some other consultants that we need. Outside repair is a little bit more. In terms of dollars, it's not that much. But I'm not going to read through all of this. You can see where the significant changes are. It's $1 million increase. Okay.
1.3 million.
3 million, my friend. So some of the justification, again, we didn't operate peak service in most of 2023, and we still had an 18% increase in ridership. So I think a lot of that was just kind of coming off of COVID, people getting more comfortable riding again. One of the things we can't do is restrict Connect Mobility ridership. We can't tell them that we can't deny service to people who are requesting that. So eligibility still is a big factor. I believe, Shelley, you can remind me, but last year we had about 240 applications come in, of which only about 17 were denied. So again, those are all new applications, they weren't renewals. They're people that found that they needed a higher level of service than they could provide otherwise. So those are good things. They leaned on us, we're able to provide that service, but I don't anticipate that ending anytime soon. Connect Flex is in demand, so I did propose a couple of other Connect Flex zones. Again, starting in June of 2025. The reason I wanted to put this in is just to make an indication to the community that we are very much focused on trying to meet their needs in other parts of the community. So one would be the southeast zone, you can see in green on this map, and the other is the north normal zone. The north normal zone, we're actually looking at what the consultant proposes, just a small orange zone. We've spoken to Unit 5, and we're actually looking at potentially extending that zone as well to better serve their needs. So there's a lot of research that we still need to do before we can come up with a formal proposal. But the way that Connect Flex is budgeted, we just budget by the number of hours of vehicles will be on the road. So we're staying within those hours now. And again, the reason that we can't start any zones earlier is simply because vehicle delivery will take 9 to 12 months. We have money that was granted to us through the federal government for electric vehicles. They're electric minivans, and I'll bring a proposal to you in the next board meeting. But those will take 9 to 12 months to procure.
Can I make a note here real quick, something that I'd be interested in, just that others might be interested in too here?
Please.
So you're proposing Connect Flex because those hours for next year's budget, but it won't start until June, so 1 quarter down. So how much in fiscal year 2026, if you were to do that, how much more cost would that be that we'd have to incur in that? You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we kind of know, like, if we want to pick and choose which ones, so we know which number we're comfortable with here. So so the committee can decide or something like that. Like, hey, since we're only going to do 1 quarter less there, if we do all year in 2026.
Right.
Your cost will increase more like that. So we have all those numbers for the ops people to look at that.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is not a proposal to run the service. This is just to put money in the budget in case we want to.
Yeah.
So that's really, unfortunately, we have to budget well in advance. So based on our existing service, it's about $600,000 per zone to operate. So that's something that we do need to consider in the future as well.
So 1.8.
Right. What we'll spend this year doing too is really evaluating how Connect Flex is impacting or can impact Connect Mobility. Because obviously all of our Flex vehicles are accessible to people with disabilities. Depending on the travel within the zones that we're proposing, it could be that people would be able to use Flex instead of Mobility. We have not seen that so much in the southern zone. I am proposing some additional staff. One is an assistant general manager position. I think as a lot of the things that we're doing are changing. So we have a lot of projects, as you know, we have the downtown transit center. We have some changes to uptown that we would like to make. We have the zones. We have a lot of outreach and things like that I need to do. The day-to-day management needs to be taken care of as well. So there's projects internally, and then there's projects externally. And I think an assistant general manager would be tremendously helpful. We had a COO position in the past, but when I came on board, I didn't want to fill that position just because I wanted to get to know the staff. I wanted to get to know everyone's abilities. I'm finding now that it would be a tremendous benefit to us if we had an assistant general manager position. Our technology continues to increase. So last year I proposed it and then pulled it. I'll propose it again this year. Our technology is aging. I don't know if you've seen a lot of buses. I see them and it annoys me that a lot of the head signs say out of service, especially when they get uptown. They lose their connection.
I just
So
thought they were out of service.
they're not. They're actually in service.
So
So
they were just driving to a location.
right. So it's frustrating for passengers, and it's something that it's aging technology that we have separated by different departments. We have a new radio system that we're trying to procure. We have video systems that we're trying to procure. So these are all things that Steve could definitely use the onboard vehicle help while he maintains the rest of the systems here in the facility. And John deals with our data. So that would be a great benefit to us as well. And then customer support specialist is something that we kind of talked about when we were talking about helping people transition to the fixed route bus from mobility. But this would really help in a lot of different ways. So it would provide outreach to students as we're trying to get more students to ride the bus. It's almost like a curriculum where somebody rides with an individual to get them comfortable with riding the bus, or riding with groups to tell them how to use the bus. It helps transition people from either from being trapped in their homes as again, our population ages, to use public transportation. But it also helps people using mobility to use a fixed route service. So it's an education position. It's not a highly paid position. It is someone that's more almost like a social worker that works for us. And then they would also help the Medicaid specialist in evaluating people who are applying for service. So again, with 270 applications, plus she has to do Medicaid billings and things like that, it's becoming pretty overwhelming for her. So there is a need for this person. They would fall within the marketing and communications department, but would also serve partly the operations department and Medicaid specialist. So I really see this role as expanding our role to get out into the community, have that one-on-one to try to get people on board the bus and riding, different than, say, marketing, which is encouraging people to ride, or communicating the benefits of riding. This person is much more focused one-on-one. It's not a good use of Aubrey's time, and Jess, our graphics person, it's not a good use of her time either. But it would definitely support, I think, what our end goal is to try to get people to use a fixed route, the more effective and more efficient service.
That travel buddy concept.
Correct.
And do we know of other systems that are using that and what their experience has been?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was at a CEO conference for public transit officials last weekend, and I had a lot of discussions with South Bend, with Fort Wayne, and other systems that have that. I believe Champaign also has that. I looked at that's actually how I came up with the customer support specialist position title. So there are some in Illinois as well, but they're having tremendous success really getting the word out. Because if you think about it, as the community ages and children become caregivers of their families, this is something that can definitely enlist support, but also provides a very necessary service that is hard for other people to do. We did have a contract, as you recall, with LifeSol to do this. They focused on the folks that LifeSol serves, and this would broaden that scope to serve more people than just them. So that kind of talks about the budget in terms of the operating costs. How do we meet those costs? So I actually looked at 3 different scenarios: a full service scenario, partial year peak, which I'm not proposing, and then a no peak. What the takeaway is that we have a balanced budget and that we have state, federal, and local funds to pay for this. The local share is 1.5 million. That increased in the last few years. The fares, we are remaining flat because we don't know exactly what fares will do. And then the miscellaneous income is advertising revenue. So we don't really have other revenue sources at this time, and we'll likely not have it next year. Our state appropriation, however, has also remained flat. So you can see as the service levels change, our requirements from the state, they pay 65% of our expenses. So our state appropriation has been 15.279 million a year for probably the last, Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, but 4 to 5 years, something like that.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So it's remained stagnant for that long, and again this year it's going to be stagnant. We recognize that that's not good going into the future, but what that means for us is that future budget increases, if we were to go full service, we could only increase the budget about 2.57, so about 2 years worth of service before we would run into challenges getting additional money from the state. If we do no peak, we could almost go 3 years based on the increase that we are experiencing this year.
What do you mean?
So
I'm confused here. So you said 65%,
right,
but they're capping that at 15,279,000.
correct.
Okay, so there's a
So the delta between what we're asking for in the no peak situation and
and
the
a positive difference is
is 2,170,000,
positive difference.
which kind of tells us that that's only 65% of the maximum we can increase in the budget. So the maximum increase then would be 3.38970. So that last column, that last number. And then looking back at what I'm asking for this year, that 1,000,003, that would take us for another three years before we bumped into that cap. On the federal side, federal appropriation is not flat. As a matter of fact, we've continued to get increases. But recently with the Fiscal Responsibility Act that was passed for the budget continuation last year, all departments would take a 5% cut. And if that's the case, it's potentially FTA would be cut as well by 5%. So we don't know exactly that that's going to take place, but that is a potential that's out there. So just to let you know, there's
So is there any
flexibility.
guidance that 5% across the board, or they have room to find within their entire budget to take 5% off?
I think it's room to find within their entire budget.
So maybe
It's
less
not a-
grants, but
Correct.
not less funding.
So it could be.
Or it could be
It could be
5% over
discretionary
everything.
funds or things like that, but we don't know what that is yet. We won't know
Yeah.
until March. So again, this is just to kind of show you that depending on the service level that we provide, impacts what our future funding is. So I felt it was important to show you this because I don't want you to be surprised if we're unable to get the state to increase its level of funding to us. The Chicago is facing a fiscal cliff now. You've probably read that in the paper with the lack of COVID funding. They've expended all of that. The ridership isn't up, and they rely a lot on ridership. Legislature is taking that into effect. For Chicago to win positive legislation, they need downstate legislators to support them. So we as downstate properties, us, Champaign, Springfield, Peoria, and so on, are also trying to hook ourselves to that bill to get that additional funding as well. So that is to be determined. We'll probably know by the end of this year what that looks like. But again, for now, we know that our state appropriation has been flat. So I wanted to share that with you.
But this year, on all of your numbers, we would get the state appropriation to cover what you're proposing.
Correct. Yeah. We're not in a shortfall yet. With full service would be in a shortfall probably next year or the year after. With the no peak in 3 to 4 years before we have a shortfall. Plus, of course, we expand service tremendously as well, and those are all things we have to pay attention to as well. So, given kind of the financial issues that we're looking at in the future. I'm not saying they're negative, it's just something that needs to be worked on. That's really another reason why I think an AGM position would be good, so that I can spend the time to go out to the community, to go out to our legislators, find those funds and advocate for the system as it should be. Okay. Next is our capital budget. Our capital budget is driven by the transportation improvement plan.
Can we stop?
Yeah,
Before we get into capital budget,
Oh.
are there questions
good.
on this budget first? Again, there doesn't have to be. Just, are there anything that he said that you had questions about or confusion about? I have some, but I'm gonna wait till the one-on-ones are a little stupid.
Yeah, that's what I did. Take what you got and then dissect it. Doing our one-on-ones. But nothing good.
Okay?
Yes.
So the capital budget, I have to say, is pretty fluid. So there are projects that we had in our capital budget for last year that we didn't get done. Our transit center is, I don't believe it's in this budget, it was likely in last year's. So what the capital budget does is it determines the capital that we need and how it would be funded. And right now, our capital budget is fully funded. Our total capital budget is $27,505,000 for this year. We requested from the city and the town $1.319 million. So for $1.3 million, they get a return of $27 million, which I think is a pretty good return. That covers the local, we have IDOT debt service in there. The more IDOT funding we use for operations, the less we can use for debt service. But for now, we should be able to cover this based on just the flow of when these purchases will take place. This is really more informational. We can certainly dig into the projects that we want to do, but I can tell you where most of it is just either replacement or improvement of the services that we already have. So I kind of wanted to highlight that, of a $1.3 million investment, there is a $27 million return. So actions moving forward, I'll have one-on-ones. We'll review the final budget based on your input, your questions. We'll fine-tune that budget. We'll come back to the budget committee with a final draft, fine-tune it again based on what their comments are, and then we'll outline whatever changes there are. So I won't come back with the exact same presentation. I'll just kind of highlight those things that we've changed since this presentation, and then we'll vote on it at the March 26th meeting.
Tim Gleason, question. Tim, we can't hear you.
We can hear you.
You sound
but
like a thing off Star Wars. Like a rattle thing. What is it? You want to type it in the chat box? We can look at the chat box, please. Sorry, Tim, it just was
You
rattling.
sound like that one, no.
Julie?
Then I want to raise a caution about, our next presentation, which primarily focuses on non-conformances to the information you've just presented us, because, we have not had a chance to discuss, and I've definitely been withholding comment because I know we were gonna talk about it later on. And I suspect that other trustees may be in the same situation. So let's not presume that this is, I think we just need to have a look at the whole thing at a time when we can talk about it one more time.
Okay, that's fair.
Thank you.
Tim's question is, when can I share something with my council? This came up last night.
We have submitted a preliminary budget to the city back in actually November. I would prefer to do it as I did in previous years after the board has made their recommendation. So after you've approved it, I'm happy to go to the council. I think last year I went in April. I'd be happy to do that again or in March in between periods if needed.
Okay. So you'd rather wait till this board approves it instead of having possibly the councils having Pam and Tim share it in case they have concerns of something that we're talking about?
Oh, they can certainly share it, but as far as me presenting to them,
Okay,
I would prefer you, since they have put you in charge of the transit system budget.
Yep.
I think it's more appropriate for you to have it now. If they want to know this preliminary step, that's fine. I'm happy to take input from them as well.
yeah, so, does that sound good to you, Pam?
Is that the both?
So can we send, your preliminary budget to both city managers and they can do with it as they see fit?
Absolutely.
And if there's questions, they can reach out to Tim and Pam, they can reach out to David, or they can reach out to their representatives on the council as well. Does that answer your question, Tim? Thumbs up? Perfect. Other questions? Okay, so here's my push, okay? You have to meet with David before next month's meeting, okay? Have to. I'm gonna call you and hound you if you don't. And so David will come to you to make it easy, buy you a cup of coffee or a donut, and
It's gonna cost both.
and I want to make sure that everyone talks to him. Okay, I'm going to keep on him, and I'm going to, like I said, make sure that he has meetings set with all of you, so you are completely aware of what he has, and I want you to ask those hard questions then. Okay,
So David's gonna reach out to us, we reach out
Yes.
to them.
David.
I'll
David is
reach out.
going to reach out to you to set up a meeting with you all
We supposed
individually.
to respond back.
Better, Linda. I'm going to find you.
And I'll do it multiple sources, text, phone call, email.
I'm going to find you. Linda.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I really don't like putting a budget forward that has service reduction, but we have to balance and we have to be sustainable. So the purpose of what I am proposing to you is to have that sustainability in the future. We can't, I don't feel that we can make assumptions, but we can take maybe some more risk than I did propose.
One last time, any other comments with this? Okay, chairman's report, short and to the point. The only thing I have to say is, I believe times changed since the last time we met. Congressman Sorensen did visit with us. That seemed like a while ago. Spent an hour and a half. Julie was here as well. Visited this facility, went to the downtown area and saw the location of the downtown transit center. He's as anxious as I am to break ground, so we're gonna move on that. And they came back and drove a bus and didn't wreck it. So I told him if he breaks it, he buys it. So was really impressed. I was impressed with what staff presented and everything. So that's all I have in my chairman's report.
Thank you. A few things in my report. So we're continuing to serve the community. Brickyard Apartments had a fire on 12/14, and we were there to support their residents. There was also a fire last night on, was it Hershey Road? Yeah, on Hershey Road, and we were there as well to support their residents, getting them out of the weather while the firemen did their job. So we're happy to have that support. They have a direct line to us. The fire department does when we need to be there. We did some Best Buddies ambassador training, as Chairman Whitehouse said. The Congressman Sorensen's visit was really terrific. I mean, he was enthusiastic about what we were providing and what our vision was for the system. I think that we have a supporter in him for sure. But one thing that we felt was also very important is we gave our union leadership an opportunity to speak to him. So they were there with us, supporting the management effort, as well as talking about some of the goals of the Amalgamated Transit Union, which he needed to hear as well. You can see all the other things. I'm not going to read them out to you. One of the things that we did today, though, was we attended the Heartland Community College Advanced Manufacturing Center and State Farm Electric Vehicle Lab ribbon cutting. And that was really a tremendous event, not only because we hope to have our own ribbon cutting in the near future, so we kind of saw the things that you should and shouldn't do, but they did a tremendous job. Governor Pritzker was there. He spoke to the group, and he was available for comment as well. So it was great not only to be there and be part of the event, but also to see how the community is supporting the electric vehicle expansion. We're always looking for ways to do employee morale. So last month we had a Super Bowl. It was either a chili soup, it was either chili bowl or soup, and we awarded prizes for the best soup. It was a great event. I was a judge. I didn't get sick, so it was all good. Yeah, I survived to tell. We have one new bus operator that's completed training. We started with a class of 2, one didn't work out, and we have another course starting soon. And then our safety and training coordinator has completed his TSSP certification, which is great for us. We still have a number of positions open, but we also have some filled. So we have 2 dispatch positions filled, and I believe that's it for dispatchers now. So we have that completely filled and 1 service technician filled as well, which we have 2 remaining.
Excuse me.
And that concludes my report.
Questions for David? Seeing none, trustee comments. Any comments from anyone online? Anyone online, trustee comments? Okay, anyone here in the room?
Great job.
Okay, we do not need an executive session. Respond to David's request for a meeting. Take a motion for adjournment, moved by trustee Foster, seconded by trustee McHugh. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Have a good night. Enjoy the weather before it turns to gross again.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Julie.
Hey, Ryan.